All right, welcome. I just wanted to discuss the Wild, what they're going to do potentially in the offseason, and what I think they should do. To clarify, I'm a Bruins fan first. I watch, but I watch every Wild game. I'm still a Wild fan, but Bruins are first in my book. And seeing how the Bruins are built compared to the Wild, it's night and day. The Wild are built so well, so deep in every aspect. It's incredible and it's a little admirable as a Bruins fan. I kind of wish that's the situation that the Boston Bruins were in. Um, so essentially, the Wild have $7.389 million in cap space. That includes the $12.743 million buyout penalty. And then at the next two seasons after this, it's $14.743 million. So big penalty, but that includes the penalty. So they still have stuff to work with. I'm going to start with the minors real quick because the Wild have depth and they have some guys that are ready to step in. Marco Rossi should be a mainstay in the Wild organization this upcoming season. He had a great last season in Iowa. Mason Shaw, a fourth round pick. He's played very well in the Iowa Wild system. Very well, actually. Makes a case to come up and play in Minnesota. Maybe more of a depth forward. Kyle Rao led the Iowa Wild in points, was almost a point per game player, had 7 game-winning goals. I don't think he's an unrestricted free agent. I don't think he comes back. I think he finds an NHL job elsewhere and gives it another go-around. All the best to Rao. Carson Lambos and Jesper Wallstedt, they're yet to play a game in an Iowa Wild uniform. They're both very young, so that will take some time to develop. I don't think we'll see them at all this season. We'll see how they develop, but you want to take your time with defensive players and goalies, really. Let them develop, let them adjust to the NHL style of hockey. Michael Chaffee, he's a restricted free agent in the AHL, undrafted, had a fantastic last year in Iowa as well. He also makes a good case to be a depth forward for the Wild. But of all these guys, I think Marco Rossi is 100% on the roster to start the season. Diving into unrestricted free agents, Nick Bukestad, I don't think he's back, but I think he's earned himself an NHL job elsewhere. I just think it's kind of tough with the roster they have. When he's more often than not this past season, he was a healthy scratch. But when he stepped into the the Wild's roster, he performed at an exceptional rate. He played very well. Was an energy guy. It was, great player to have. Delorier, I love Delorier, and it breaks my heart to say I don't think he'll be back, and I don't think they should bring him back. He brings very good defensive play, plays on the penalty kill. That's an asset that a lot of teams need. Physical presence, can drop the gloves. He's a very good locker room guy in general, and cheap. He was $1 million last year. I think he's deserved a bit of a pay raise, maybe like $1.2 million, but I think it's with another team. The Wild have guys that can drop the glove, that can play a physical style. Notably, the entire Eriksson, Ekfelino, Greenway line. You got DeHame, you got Dumba every once in a while. You have Jacob Middleton. John Merrill gets a little gritty once in a while. Addison kind of likes to play that way. He's a littler guy and he's still young. He still has to grow into his body a bit, but they have guys. Whereas some teams, like Boston, they don't have guys. So I think Delorier is out. I wish nothing but the best for Delorier. I'd love for them to find a way to re-sign him. I don't see how it would work with their assets they currently have. Jordy Ben, I'd be surprised if he comes back. Was a healthy scratch almost every game, and when he was in the roster, he didn't look that great. I think they're going to let him go on free agency. And Fleury, unrestricted free agent, had kind of a down year from his Vezina year, like a year ago. That's normal in Fleury with his stats. He'll fluctuate every few years. At this point, you don't know if it's due to him being 37 and getting up there in age, but it's not an unlike Fleury season. He wasn't bad. He was just being Fleury, and sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. It's been like that throughout his whole career, especially in Pittsburgh, a little bit in Vegas. We'll see. We'll get into the goalie discussions But essentially, as it is in all the circled ones, all 3 players are restricted free agents now. They're not to be signed. They haven't been signed yet for this upcoming season. Priesthoff, Hartman, Zuccarello, first line's a mainstay. This is your 1A or 2A, 2B lines. The Foligno, Eriksson, Greenway line was the second line to start last season. It's kind of flopped, but it depends on the night. The minutes usually even out between these 2 lines, usually around 17, 16 minutes. But, everyone's saying the Gaudreau line's the second line as of late. So you got Fiala, who's a restricted free agent, made $5.1 million last year. Point per player last year, should command a pay raise. Still young, restricted free agent, young. You got Gaudreau centering that line, who's been great. Just came out of nowhere and started scoring at a half point per game, which is excellent. And you have Matt Boldy entering his second season. Great rookie year. That third line, the shutdown line, sometimes it's referred to as the grief line. I don't care for naming lines, but, the grief line, if you will. You got Foligno on that left wing, Eriksson centering with Greenway on the right. Oh, by the way, Foligno and Eriksson both got Selke votes because that's how good this line is defensively. I think Greenway deserves some votes too. I think Greenway was one of the better defensive wingers in the league by far. I'm a little disappointed he didn't get votes, but at the same time, as you're looking at it at the end of the season, it's the third line. 2 of the players already got Selke votes. It kind of makes sense to an extent, but don't sleep on Jordan Greenway. Dude's a tank. Dude plays great defense, and when he drives to the net, it might go in. He's got a great shot, but he's a big dude that can do some nice dekes and get around some guys. So it's a fun line to watch, honestly. On the fourth line, at this point, I put Dewar in for Delorier. You got Dewar, Jost, and Brandon Duhaime. In net, you have Cam Talbot, and Fleury's unsigned, so all you have is Talbot at the moment. They don't really have a goalie from the AHL to bring up. Maybe Zane McIntyre. He's been the starter in Iowa, and he's played pretty well. It just hasn't translated to NHL play. We'll see if McIntyre gets the start of the season, but we'll get into the goalie situation after. First line defensive pairing, Middleton and Spurgeon. Spurgeon's the captain. Middleton is a restricted free agent, came from San Jose. Very good young player, big guy. Spurgeon spent most of his season playing with Goligoski, and Goligoski was excellent on the first line as well. But I think moving forward, it's going to be Middleton, Spurgeon. Second line, you have Brodin, Dumba. It's a solid top 5, if you will, if you include Goligoski. Third line, Goligoski and Merrill, but you also have Kulikov and Addison, Kalen Addison, who Addison should be a mainstay in the league as well. Dewar and Addison are both guys, at least looking at their stats, they take a few years and they grow every year with whatever league they're in to becoming a great player. So you got to be patient with those 2 guys. If they're not performing offensively or whatever, it's going to happen. So this is kind of where we get funky. This is where I start making little edits. I don't really know how I'm going to do this, but we're gonna go. So Rossi, he's gonna go up into the NHL. We know that. We'll start with the forward groups. We'll start with the forward groups first. Fiala, there's a lot of trade speculation that he's probably going to go. It's at the point where you either sign Fiala or Middleton, and I think finding a defensive player of his caliber, finding both players is tough, but at the same time, I think Middleton will cheaper. It'll give him a little more cap flexibility, because next year is going to be tougher for the offseason. They have to re-sign guys like Boldy, who's going to command an increase. They have a lot of players. Let's see. Jost, depending on how he plays this year. Freddie Gaudreau's contract's up. Duhaime should command an increase. Who else? Addison, we'll see how he plays. Dumba, Kulikov, and Cam Talbot. So we'll see what next season brings. That's minus another $2 million in cap next season. So here's what I think they should do. I think Fiala is gone. Honestly, I just do. I think it's too financially tough for them to keep it, kind of because of the buyouts, not because they don't want to keep it. There was negotiating problems last season. I think Fiala has arbitration rights as well. Yeah, he's arbitration eligible. So I don't think you're going to get the price you want for Fiala. I don't think he's going to take much of a discount to stay in Minnesota. He'll probably take a discount, but at the same time, he's going to be making more than he did last year because he's a point per game player. He can score, he can pass, he can play defense in his own zone. He's a good 200-foot player. But I think he's gone. I think they're going to save that payroll. I think Fiala. I think he gets traded to New Jersey. I do. I think the rumors are true. I think they trade Fiala for the second overall pick. Obviously, you're going to have to throw a sweetener in there. You can't just trade Fiala for a second round pick. Second round pick could be a centerpiece for your organization. They're going to have to throw some type of sweetener in there, whether it's a pick or a prospect. Pick, prospect. The Wild have their own pick this year, the first round pick. That could go as a sweetener. So New Jersey still gets a first round pick. They could trade one of their many prospects. I don't see Rossi. I don't see Lambos or Wallstedt getting traded. But they could throw in Freddie Gaudreau as well, a veteran center who is up and coming and has clearly played well with two younger guys. I think Gaudreau would be a good fit in New Jersey. I think Gaudreau gets traded too. Reason being, Fiala was the anchor to that line. Fiala, Boldy looked great when Fiala was playing. When Fiala wasn't there, Boldy was all right. He was a good player, but he wasn't producing at the same rate. Same with Freddie Gaudreau. A lot of Gaudreau's success was due to Fiala. So here's what I think happens. I think Jost takes over on that wing. Jost has played exceptionally well in a top six role when he's given the minutes. He flourishes. He looks great. He hasn't earned that opportunity playing in the bottom six, but when we did see him on the wing with Gaudreau and Boldy throughout the year, he looked fantastic. You can't deny it. Go look at the film. It was incredible. But Gaudreau's gone. I think he's one of those disposal players. You'd love to keep him. He does a lot of things right. He plays a very good defensive game, which allows his wingers to drive up to the offensive zone. I think Rossi takes that spot. I do. Rossi and Boldy have a lot of chemistry. This would be kind of like the first round pick line, if you will. It's all a bunch of young guys, all restricted free agents. I think that's what's going to happen. Fiala's gone. You get the second overall pick. That's another excellent prospect, another slew of first round picks you have in your, two first round picks this year in your minor league system developing. The Foligno line stays the same. Dewar, I think, stays. Jost is obviously gone. So you got to figure out your fourth line center there. I think there's decent options. Specifically, first person that comes to mind, Curtis Lazar from the Bruins, unrestricted free agent. I think if you throw him $1 million, maybe $1.2 million, you have yourself one great fourth line center. Still a young guy. I think Dewar and Duhaime would both mesh really well with Lazar's style of play. Lazar's a smaller dude, plays physical, but is also scores and can finesse. He's had to play a defensive and physical role in Boston, but he's naturally, an offensive player. So he's really developed into this overall player. I think that would be a steal. Fourth line centers, you can find them. Maybe Bukestad gets an opportunity. Maybe they bring up a guy from the AHL. I don't know who, but or maybe they get a fourth, like Miles Wood or something. I think he's a winger actually, but they'll have to figure that out. There's options in the market, and you'll have cap space because you don't have to sign Fiala. I think they re-sign Middleton. I think he gets 4.2, 4.5 million. I could see his value going up to 5 million, but I think it's a bridge deal. I think it's like 4.5 million for like probably 3 years to get him through this cap penalty. So Middleton's good. Last issue is the goaltending, right? You have Talbot, who's signed to 1 year. Fleury's an unrestricted free agent. You have Zane McIntyre you could call up, and that could be a solution, assuming you can't figure anything else out. That's kind of your backup plan B. I think they go after John Gibson. And here's what. I think you give him Dumba, because you have a guy like Kalen Addison who should be playing every night. You have a guy like Kulikov who signed to a contract of $2.25 million, who can be a very good defensive, like third line defenseman. Can play on both sides of, can play left and right shot defenseman. He's an asset. I think you're heavy on defensemen. You have guys you can call up from the minors like Joe Hickett's. Not going to be mainstays, but you have depth defensemen already. I think Dumba also goes in addition to Fiala. And here's what I'd like to see. To Anaheim for Gibson. Obviously, John Gibson, he's a goaltender from the Anaheim Ducks. It's not a fair swap for Dumba, straight up. You're going to have to throw in, you're going to have to throw something in. This is where I think you'll lose a prospect. It might be Shaw. It might be Shaw, and it might be like a second round pick, or it could be a first round, could be next year's first round pick. There's options. I don't think you're trading Rossi, Lambos, and Wallstedt. But I think the Bruins need, or the Wild need to find a solution in net. Oh, sorry, I forgot to mention, I think Talbot also goes. So they dump off Talbot's contract. They have more room to sign Gibson. They have a lot of cap flexibility going into this season, the trade deadline next year. They have flexibility, which is huge in this league at this point with the flat cap that's been for 3 years and it only went up $1 million this year. It's huge to have cap flexibility and a roster that can compete. So I think Talbot's gone. Talbot and Dumba go to Anaheim for Gibson. You're probably going to have to throw in, again, a sweetener, maybe a prospect, Shaw, maybe a first-round pick. Anaheim likes their prospects, and they know how to trade. They robbed Boston with the Hampus Lindholm deal. Hampus Lindholm's great, don't get me wrong, and Boston really needed that, but boy, they paid a price. And you're going to pay a price for Gibson. He's a cheap goaltender that's signed for, the next 4 years. But he's a number one, and that's what the Wild need. I think they re-signed Fleury. I think he takes like a $3.5 million contract and backs up Gibson, or it's like, 1A, 1B type thing going forward. So I'm going to rewrite this board to show how I think it'll be done. Give me 1 second. So here's how it would look. Same first line, Jost, Rossi, Boldy on the second line. I think to start the season out, the Foligno, Eriksson, Greenwave line is going to be the second line as it was last year. And they're going to see how this line does and merges and meshes. Right, Jost, Rossi, Boldy. Fourth line, Dewar, free agent signing for fourth line center, which there are plenty this offseason. And Duhaime and Dewar, I think, should be mainstays this year. Goaltending, you have Gibson and Fleury. I think Fleury probably signs a 2-year, $3.5 million contract in lieu of waiting for Jesper Wallstedt to develop. And I think Fleury retires and Wallstedt takes the place. And, you can have him backing up Gibson for a couple of years to ease him into the league, as you should do with young goaltenders, because it's proven to work. If you throw him to the fire, you have a Carter Hart situation, you have a Jordan Binnington situation. You got to ease them in. Going from, 30 to 40 games a year to 50 or 60 it's a lot, especially at an NHL pace. Those aren't easy games for a goaltender. So that's what I think is going to happen in net. But you have Gibson throughout the duration of his contract to develop and be your number one goalie until Wallstedt's ready to to fulfill that spot. Defense, I think they start the season out with Middleton and Spurgeon on the first line, and Goligoski and Brodin on the second line. I don't see the Goligoski-Brodin line meshing that well. I think they swap. Goligoski-Spurgeon will be the first line, and then Middleton and Brodin will be the second line. And I think that's an incredible top four you have right there. Third defensive pairing, you have Kulikov and Merrill, with Addison being the depth, and Merrill will, these bottom three guys will all swap out for each other. Again, Kulikov can play on both sides, so if Merrill's sitting, Kulikov will play on the right side, Addison will come up on the left side. So they have options. My reasoning for making a change on defense, I think it is the reason they did not progress in the playoffs. Their defense wasn't great. They got beat too often. They got caught driving into the offensive zone without the proper coverage too often. I think the biggest offender of that typically is Dumba. He can be very good offensively and very good defensively, but if he's going to go into the offensive zone, there needs to be the proper coverage, and oftentimes there isn't, or it's a sloppy turnover. Again, not to single out Dumba or say he's a bad player, the reason the Wild lost, because as a Bruins fan, really most defensive players on the Bruins have that issue, and it's a lot worse than what Dumba does. But I think the defense could have been better. I think you need to make a change, shake it up. It's obviously going to hurt a lot not to have Dumba in that locker room. I think you have a lot of leaders and you have a lot of young guys, and maybe you bring in like a veteran player like a Claude Giroux or something. Probably not Claude Giroux. He's probably going to cost too much, but I don't know, someone like a Sean Thornton or whatever. Not a Sean Thornton, a Joe Thornton. Obviously not going to sign in Minnesota, but that would be a great fourth line center, a leader. Someone to help replace Dumba's presence in that locker room. Dumba's a great guy. His contract's pretty good price. You'll fetch a decent amount on the market for him because he's worth it. But the Wild really need to shake things up. And with the emergence of Jake Middleton, I don't think anyone expected him to be as good as he has been this past season with the Wild, coming from San Jose at the trade deadline. He was outstanding. You have a guy like Goligoski locked up for, the next 2 years? Where's Goligoski? Yeah, 2 years at a discounted rate of $2 million. He's obviously getting old, but at the same time, you have guys like Addison coming in, Carson Lambos, and so on. But you also need that cap flexibility, right? Dumba's gone, Fiala's gone, Jost steps up, Rossi makes the league. You're saving a lot of cap space. You're giving yourself a lot of flexibility. If Jost doesn't work out on that line, you can move him back down to the fourth line center position. You can go out and you have the flexibility to sign a top six forward, right? You want to give yourself some flexibility. You want to be able to take on, do teams favors as we've seen the past few years for cap flexibility. The Wild may get like a draft pick for retaining like $2 million in a Toronto Maple Leafs trade or something. You might get a second round pick for that. Great, because cap space is going to be at a premium this year, as it has been. So having that cap flexibility only pays dividends. How you use it is important, but Bill Guerin, I think, to this point, has done an excellent job. I think they're in a good shape throughout the buyout with the young guys they have coming up. Those are cheaper contracts. I think the Wild are in a very good position to still compete. I think they can compete with this lineup. I think Rossi and Boldy together are going to surprise a lot of people. I think Jost is going to surprise a lot of people with his top 6 minutes. Should he get them? The Kaprizov and Foligno line are always fantastic, and this fourth line is going to be a bit of a wild card, but it's a fourth line, and sometimes you got to roll with 3. But what's his face? Dean Evison does a good job rotating through the 4 lines, getting everyone playing time. I think the defense will be good. I think ultimately you'd like to replace Kulikov with Addison. Addison's young, he needs to develop. But if you're going to take a risk, this is a great year to take a risk. Again, your buyout penalties are really starting to hit. They're, they're intense for the next 3 years beginning this year. You have a lot of reason to not make the playoffs. And I think they will, especially with this lineup. And you're giving these guys a good chance to prove themselves. Jost, he goes off, he scores, 20 goals, gets 30 assists, 50 points in 80 games. That's $2 million for next season. That's an asset, and that's a trade piece you can use should you need to. You have options, so that's what I think the Wild should do. A little aggressive on my end. Trading Dumba and Fiala and Talbot, I think is a lot. I don't expect to see that out of Bill Guerin. He's more reserved, but could be exciting. So let me know what you guys think. Thanks for hanging in there. Appreciate you guys.